And we are live for another episode of the Black Stitch Hockey Cast. It is a bright and sunny evening here in New England on this August the 11th, 2024. A very quiet, day, week for professional hockey. Linka Gretzky Cup has been pretty active, and our birthday boy Liam, happy birthday by the way, will have way more on that than I will.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, that was a pretty high activity week for me there, which was very disruptive to my sleeping schedule, as well documented. I actually pulled an all-nighter the night before the Metal game, so on Friday night I literally the extent of rest was like that I had was like an hour-long nap on my aunt's couch down in Hamilton before the bronze medal game started, and that's it. Which partially accounted for why I spent a significant chunk of my 30th sleeping in.
Yeah.
It was fun being on the grindstone, though. Some fantastic individual narratives played out in a way that was very enjoyable and sometimes even cathartic, like in like a secondhand, vicarious manner for some of those players.
For sure.
Yeah, Hamilton. Woo! Happy birthday, Liam.
Thank you very much, sir.
How was the sleep today, my guy?
Not bad. I probably still have some debt to pay off there, but I made some good progress, and I was able to get my usual cardio in, so I got best of both worlds, which is about as much as I'd want from today, honestly.
It was good.
So you laid back and called off the attack? Couldn't resist.
I did. Black in dreams, though. I was basically in a coma. There wasn't any sort of interesting things like my recent dream slash vision of Worcester, Massachusetts, just being a datascape, which is plausible, to be honest with you.
The Worcester Railers are just a simulation.
Yes, as were the Sharks, Ice Cats, and many others before them. Which means that when you were if you were like a scout who stopped by to have a meal on your way to Springfield or whatever, which was apparently a very common occurrence because they had a full-on exquisite buffet, I have read, you were just eating a very, very convincing set of data.
You know, the more I think about this and the history of Worcester professional ice hockey, like the fact that they've also experienced relegation in a very roundabout way, going from AHL to Coast, with a litany of junior teams, man, like definitely a simulation if an American sports city is legitimately following the relegation path.
It makes sense that it would be in one of those places that is one of those many places in this Commonwealth that is named after an English municipality. They just look at the Prem and it's like, yeah, we're going to model it like this.
It's beautiful. Sorry, I was scrolling Twitter real fast, and Tom Cruise is starting to look like somebody tried to draw Harrison Ford from memory, and that just really fucking threw me from a loop.
Now I'm thinking about how his top row of teeth has a tooth in the exact center of it. That dude literally just has a tooth right in the center of his mouth. It's infuriating.
You know, to really go down the rabbit hole, I don't know why. As I'm thinking about this, I'd really like. So I'm gonna frame this hypothetical sports cast of I'd really like to see a conversation between Tom Cruise and Colin Cowherd talking about the goaltending state of the Western Conference in the NHL, knowing that neither of them knows anything on the subject, seeing both of them try to pretend that they like knew, and if one of them could convince your fair weather hockey fan on anything.
That's about as good as the 2024 White Sox versus 2013-14 Sabres triathlon idea.
Because, like, Tom Cruise, to quote Christian Bale loosely, referring to, I based my character in American Psycho on his just lifeless, soulless smile from late night TV. And, like, Colin Cowherd has an equally false facade and just, like, how fugazi can we get those guys together talking about something like we need, like, I want more of that, like, there's a level, because, I look at, that situation, hypothetically, of course, and I see awful sports takes from hockey pages trying to stir up controversy based on Russian players not coming over that are just doing a shitload of damage to the game. But these assholes are pretending that they actually know something about the sport, and there's some degree of validity to it, to people like having that precipice. But the thought of Tom Cruise and Colin Cowherd talking about Western Conference NHL goaltending, every person sitting there would just be waiting for one of them to say something actually true. By accident.
I mean, I think the Russian factor thing is, I can honestly only say it makes sense if you have like the basest understanding of geopolitics ever, because like really what it was predicated on was that that Vladimir Putin was going to put those guys on a T-shirt, which was never going to happen. Like, he's probably too busy like fighting a war for one thing, and for another talking things like Russo-Ukrainian history with Tucker Carlson to know who most of these guys really are or care about what they're doing. And plus, from a policy standpoint, it's like, which makes more sense, locking your best athletes in the country as if the whole thing is a gulag, or using them as an international relations tool the only way you possibly can with the IIHF ban, by making your country look good on the global stage as some sort of like a policy instrument in a de facto sense. Like, I'd never vote for the guy, and like I don't have positive things to say about the regime as a whole, but they're not stupid and they're not Disney villains. Like, it's like countries are ultimately going to act in their own interests as when it comes down to it. So I never really thought it made a degree of sense at all.
Like, one of the articles, and I came across probably 5 or 6 articles. I didn't even read them because there was no point. Because all I read the title is Russian kid would more the key takeaway is Russian player would rather develop in KHL than AHL at the age of 19. And I sit here, I'm like, yeah, that makes fucking sense. I know a thing or two about hockey development. So then I just click into the comments because that's where the real meat of hockey fans are, and just like, oh, if he's in bed with Russia, he should never be able to come over. He's bigger than the team. It's an Eric Lindros situation. And I sit there, I'm like, man, to fundamentally misunderstand what the fuck is going on here. To be fair, this is on the journalists, not the uneducated buffoons in the comment section, but the uneducated journalists spinning it like this is a kid who doesn't want to play in the National and has no professional ambitions in the Western League. Like, 19 years old, only a select few players at 18, 19, 20 are going to cut it in the NHL. The fact that we're still at a point where people have no fucking casual hockey observers, who are probably mainly NFL fans based on how little they fucking understand how anything in the world works besides hand, egg, go, boom. Just Oh yeah, this guy has an ego because he doesn't want to fly 3,000 miles away from his home to make $70,000 a year. Why is a journalist even playing like? If you're a hockey journalist in a position to even have a platform, and you have to rely on clickbait titles to defame Eastern European and like Eurasian prospects like that, like what the fuck are you doing? Like it's so crazy to me that in this era of misinformation, people just blindly trust these headlines. Like, if I sit here and say, that Rob Blake's a fool and the LA Kings are a second-rate organization with their recent decision making, you know, there's logic and there's a paper trail explaining that. It's not, I'm not sitting here saying Rob Blake is literally Satan and wants the LA Kings to be the most overpaid and unproductive team in the league. Like, there's a difference between portraying, malpractice in deliberate, transgressions and just being basically incompetent. Like, there's a clear and concise difference between the two, and it's bizarre that we've reached a point where, specifically hockey and really sports journalism can't even, like, delineate between the two at this point.
Yeah. Did you see the communal response to how John Bailey addressed the Alexei Kolosov situation on Philly Hockey Now? So basically, this went up the chain all the way to the Snow the goalie guys, like Anthony Sanfilippo, for saying that he despised the clickbaity. They despised effectively the clickbaity headline of saying that the Flyers abandoned Kolosov, a Belarusian, who was handling the obstacles of being there, and just left him in a hotel room in Allentown by himself, effectively, when he came over to LHV. And they were they're saying that this the portrayal of the situation, the Flyers, that they were neglectful or whatever. It's no, this by the literal definition of the term, this was effectively an abandonment because you did leave him by himself without really catering to his actual situation or doing anything to help the transitional process move along better. And it does fit the dictionary definition of abandonment to leave something or someone by themselves unattended, which is effectively what happened in this situation. And it's wasn't the most delicate or most I guess not necessarily nuanced, but descriptive detail or account of what occurred. Not as necessarily, but I mean, there was it wasn't inaccurate, and there was very much valid critique that came out of it. Not to mention anything that with the pay structure of how this of how that sort of beat gig works, you can't sit on your hands and you have to report on things as often as possible, and that's sort of sometimes manifests itself in taking up a story that you might not like or might not be super palatable to readers. So I don't really think John was any sort of villain in this scenario. He acknowledged that some manners of which he perceived the situation might have been ham-fisted or short-sighted, but it wasn't inaccurate by any means.
And speaking of things that were, I don't have a good sequitur here. I was going to pivot this over to really giving you the floor, Liam, for your recaps of the recent Linka Gretzky tournament and really your developmental perspectives on the other side of the tournament.
Well, let's see. So Canada did indeed end up taking home their 25th gold medal at this event, with Czechs. The Czechs finished as the runners-up in a 2-1 decision in the gold medal game. So when all was said and done, the top three scorers for Canada were Cole Resney, who of course was inserted into the line one role due to Braden Coots' suspension during the preliminary phases, and retained that role for the gold medal game even after he came back, and was more than capable of handling it. Emil Guite, very reliable line two presence on the wing. And Gavin McKenna and Matt Schaefer were tied for the spots right underneath them. Schaefer, of course, being the captain of this squad, much as he was for the squad that took home the WHC 17 gold. So he has a lot of experience in leadership, very poised. You know, this kid has been put through the ringer, having lost both his mother and his billet mom in such short order, experiencing just this, very harrowing personal tragedy that is so unlike a lot of what his peers have done. I'm very much actively rooting for him. You know, it just, a kid who's just been put through some special, just horrifying adversity, and excels at a position that's so difficult to develop as one of the youngest players in that class with already such an impressive profile. I definitely want him to succeed, and I think he's more than capable of doing that. The squad just overall, they're freaking. I have the team stats pulled up. Let me pull it up again. I think, yeah, plus 20 goal differential with 24 goals for and 4 goals allowed in those 5 games. Really just an outstanding performance. Less than 1 goals against per game. Pretty impressive stuff from that generation. That's such a good contributor to the depth that this 2025 class. And some impressive 26 contributors as well, such as McKenna, of course, who didn't necessarily look like the best player on that squad, but definitely is, punching above his weight in a manner you expect from a future first overall pick, who might be more like an Austin Matthews than a Connor McDavid in terms of transformative capabilities, but still very, very good. And Sweden took home the bronze, having defeated the USA 6-3 in the bronze medal game. Victor Klingstell finished as the tournament's leading scorer with 12 points. And, his line in general just really went off. But, some of those guys on that first unit were kind of benefiting from having, surges. I think that was especially the case for Stenberg, especially Ivar. And Gastrin as well, although he kind of had his moments in the peaks, but Klingstell was just producing every game in a manner akin to Adam Benak from the Czech Republic, who was just having impact shifts every time in a way that manifested itself in points, but oftentimes just having that right amount of energy, inserting himself into the attack and pressing the issue that just to apply defensive pressure by helping the team control possession in the OZ for long stretches at a time. His PK work was even good too. He's not. I don't know necessarily if that kid's going to be accruing Selke votes or anything like that, but his capabilities of locking guys down is pretty impressive. For a kid who's 5'7", his one-on-one defensive capabilities and really tying guys up is pretty impressive. If someone were to tell me talent-wise that he was the best player of the 25 class, yes, including James Haggins when I say this, I wouldn't, object. Really just at this point, the physical frame limitations are the only thing really holding it back. And even then, that's negotiable when you're at a talent level that he's at, where he's just consistently practically committing the equivalent of crimes of violence on in like a hockey sense on the opposition. It's just unbelievable what he's capable of in both on and off puck offensive capabilities, especially. And I did think some of the USA squad who finished in fourth, especially knowing that due to insurance liabilities and issues like that of that nature, as well as wanting kids from different programs to get a look, that this isn't the US NTDP crop. Although some of them might be, some of those guys do get invited to U18s subsequently, and the later incarnations based off of the looks that they produce. Like Nicholas Sikora, very talented offensive player, very shot heavy in a manner akin to his father Peter before him. Like I definitely thought he had a good look in this tournament. Some of their Vernon Fiddler's son Blake, who plays for the Edmonton Oil Kings up in the Dub. There were a few guys in this tournament who are like 6'4" or taller defensemen, such as him, that impressed me with them having tools like four-way mobility, things like that you don't really expect the guys to have, where they can defend well for reasons other than just having an impressive reach. And he was one of those guys in that category that really made an impression on me in that respect, to where I can see, a very good future for him as well. I just think that with the pretty impressive versatile skill sets that those guys have, and with there being room for growth, there's a lot that can still come out of this USA crop. And I think it shows the positive direction that overall hockey dev outside the USNTDP is doing, in what direction that they're going in, the progress that they've made. And likewise, I think it shows some of those kids, such as let's see, Matthew Lansing, Waterloo Blackhawks, Omaha Lancers for Nicholas Sikora. These kids are just coming from USHL squads, and which it shows despite the final score not representing it, they did go blow for pretty long stretches with Canada in that semi. So I think that it shows that the USHL is a viable dev environment, approximately equivalent to at least the CHL at this point. So I was pretty pleased to see some of the results that came out of that. So those are my major takeaways, as well as it being a good reminder, some of these high school programs, this is a reminder of how good the freaking public school programs are out in Minnesota. It's the one exception to where you play for your high school team if you can't make the junior team. Out in Minnesota, it's basically the opposite. Dave Stenbrum, some of the things he did at matchup that in that tournament, it's a good reminder of that. And even some of the other programs from different parts of the country, a good reminder of prep capabilities, Teddy Mutrin, local kid from Norwell, Mass, is at St. Sebastian School. Those are continuing to get, they've always been blue blood programs, but continuing to get better. So it was a pretty cool thing to see. And those were basically my major takeaways.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. It's awesome.
For sure. Sorry about that. Had to look into something urgently for a different situation. To anybody who wondered where I just slipped off to.
It wasn't the Twilight Zone.
Might have been.
There's a lot of NEPAC representation on this USA squad as well, which I thought was pretty cool. Some of those programs, the dev environments, that are it's a pretty damn good AAA league as far as I'm standing, and like some of the results that are coming out of it were represented on this stage, I'd say.
So let's see, where does that take us next on this evening's episode?
Do you have some sort of like New York Islanders headline that you can use? Because there were a couple of Long Island goals on that squad.
Let's see, where can I take something with the New York Islanders right now, other than Mike Bartner dropping yet another questionable top 10 list?
The more he goes on, the more I think he has to be a troll. Like, there's just no way. Like, it's like the shit. Like, if it were posted by Heat Daddy, I'd be laughing at it. Sometimes.
It's kind of goofy thinking of Bartner, now as his top 10 players in his projection 10 years from now. I remember there was a point where Bartner would put stuff out there, and I would agree with probably 75% of his takes, and now I agree with maybe about 5% of his takes. And man, like, to even try to do this list, ignoring players drafted from 2000, like, man, this list cracks me up. Like, the thought that the Islanders are going to be bad enough this year to get James Higgins is laughable. But the others, like, Gavin McKenna being a Flame also feels like an absolute reach. And Vigo Bjork being a Shark, once again, feels like kind of a reach, knowing what needs to happen in the next couple of years. But man, to also already have Landon Dupont on this list, and really like part E of why I'm scratching my head is, man, why? I agree with him. Extremely goofy in his own words, but this is where I take my issue with this list specifically. If you're gonna put a list out forecasting the top 10 players 10 years from now, it is 2024. And Sidney Crosby is probably still on the list of the top 10 best players in the NHL, depending on who you ask. And you're telling me you don't have a single player selected before 2022 in your top 10 in 2035. Like, fuck. Like, damn, you just pretty much told me that a bunch of guys taken with the top 3 picks in a span of 4 windows are all going to be towards the top of the league. Like,
yeah, I mean,
if you like, speculation and goofiness aside is completely fine, but like, if you're just going to be egregiously fucking stupid with something you put on the internet, why even put it out there?
I think the only degree of merit that I think it has is that the window between 23 and 27 does have like some really, really impressively profiling guys, including people who didn't even crack that list, like Jackson Jacobson from 27, who probably, just due to the nature of his positional development, will have a more immediate impact on the NHL than Landon Dupont due to defensemen having longer depth curves. But it's like, it's not like guys who were drafted even like in a handful of years before that are going to be totally old men at that point. Some of them will be at the tail end of their prime, possibly, but still enough to be in the conversation. So it's just like it was bad, but like the 2031 was worse because like I don't know if it's necessarily a lock, absolutely, that McDavid is going to be in the top 3, never mind 2, in 2030. And, like, it's just, and then McKinnon, you can kind of raise that same sort of question mark as well, although the replies were worse, because it was like, some Canes fan went full homer. It's like, Nikishin slander will not be tolerated. It's like, yeah, okay, look, viable top pairing defenseman ceiling, not top 10 player in the league ceiling. Let's be real here. And it might have been a troll account, but the other one saying Landon Dupont should be on the list as well. Was just and to bookmark that was like I bookmarked that for the fucking stupidity because there's a good chance that the fucking kid might still be in the WHL at that point just by the nature of how long his dev is going to take. It's like, yeah, I understand he earned it. Yes, he absolutely did. But he absolutely deserves to be playing in the CHL at a young age. But it doesn't mean that it's going to happen a lot faster than it is for anyone else that position. Like a bit, maybe. But, part of why it's so hard is because it's, something that takes maturation. Because a big chunk of why, like, the defensive position is so hard to take is because in terms of, like, the dev, it's just, like, the reads that you had to make as a defenseman are a lot more demanding and with a lot more at stake than the reads you have to make as a forward. And so that's one of those things that literally takes time and nothing else. So, like, Landon Dupont top talent in 2030 is just within 3 years of him being drafted is just absolutely absurd.
Yeah. I mean, I also look at his list, man, and like
being fourth also, like, come on, dude. But keep going.
Jack Hughes being on his 2030 list, but being omitted from his 2035 list is fucking hilarious. Like you really genuinely believe that Jack Hughes will not still, you're telling me that a 34-year-old Jack Hughes will not be viable. Like, bro.
No, he'll be washed, totally. He won't even be putting up points in October at that point.
Like, do I think that Hughes is, Hughes had let's face it, this is a big year for Jack Hughes of like, when you look at all of his stats, you look at his goals above replacement, you look at his offense, you look at his 200-foot game, like, look, 2022-23 Hughes was, exceptional, MVP caliber type player. But the player he was in 21-22 and the player he was in 23-24 weren't that player. But, like, he's still, cool. He went, this is kind of like the John Tavares cycle, I guess I'll call this, of, like, sure, has Tavares been able to replicate his, MVP runner-up season with the Islanders? Yes, his first year in Toronto. But, like, his first year in Toronto, it's a massive fucking outlier from what he's been his entire career. And, like, John Tavares is just, he's a bottom, like, his prime, he was probably, like, anywhere between the 7th and 14th best center in the National Hockey League, and now he's basically just a viable middle six center with, defensive lapses, but, like, ultimately, a decent offensive contributor. And,
Yeah.
if that's the worst thing, like, if that's the future that Jack Hughes has, like, Jack Hughes 10 years from now or whatever, when he's the same age as Tavares, is probably just going to be like a tepid second line center that can do some decent work on the power play, but is still a pretty good, like, even strength merchant.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's kind of tough to measure some of the guys' performances for New Jersey this year, too, because, like, between the injuries that they had, obviously we saw that the whole team, it felt like the system, and the whole rhythm of the offense was off. I mean, Jack Hughes was still, I mean, obviously the numbers don't show how great, obviously, when you look at the season before that, but, I mean, I still felt like he generated the most offense on the roster when he was in.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like how, it's the same, really it's the same narrative for Nico Hischier as well, of, like,
Yeah.
a year ago he was world-class superstar, but 2 out of the last 3 years he's just been a moderately impactful top 6 player.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, injuries, obviously Hischier took that nasty headshot this season, and Hughes did hurt his ribs, I think, in that same game. Who the hell were they playing, though? I don't know, I can't remember, but they did both get hurt in the same game, and, I mean, Hughes did miss considerable time with what I perceived to be either a rib or a shoulder injury, and, again, I mean, obviously those are pretty debilitating, especially the shoulders, but You still, I mean, your point's just like on point though.
I hope my point was on point and not on tangent. Geometry joke, anybody?
And it is interesting too because I think it was Shesty that, I mean, obviously again, it's Shesty. I like Shesty. I always think it's interesting when you listen to these guys talk about other guys that they play against on Rivals. I mean, Shesty did compare him to McKinnon and Crosby, which is pretty insane because you look at how high of praise it is, and again, obviously we'll see like obviously how it works out, but that is a pretty huge compliment from a rival goalie.
Yeah, it's a huge compliment. It doesn't mean anything, but it's a huge compliment.
Oh yeah,
Like, shit, man. Like anybody can compare anyone to anyone, and
yeah, they can. I mean, when you look at Chesty, I mean, for me, I just look at it as far as like you look at the Rangers Devils rivalry. And I can't really think of too many times any of them have said anything nice about anybody on the other side of it. I mean, obviously, we look at Detroit and Colorado, where they had a little bit more respect, but like, I mean, there's no respect between the two franchises.
I mean, look, I think everybody here's seen enough interviews with Igor Shesterkin. I mean, if there's one thing I can say about Shesty is he's a really nice guy. You know, this is a guy, and to chip away at his credibility. I mean, this is a guy who had Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner with Ilya Sorokin. I mean, if a Rangers goalie and an Islanders goalie are breaking bread over the holidays, nothing he says about any of his rivals matter. And this isn't an insult to Shesterkin in any way. It's just
Yeah, no.
he's genuinely just a nice fucking dude, which pretty much like
Well,
it would mean something to me if Scott Stevens came out here and said Brian Leach is the best defenseman in NHL history. Because,
yeah,
Scott Stevens doesn't say nice things about anybody because he's an asshole.
yeah. I mean,
Like, when a
Chesty,
nice guy says something nice, it does, like, Patrice Bergeron could say anything and I wouldn't fucking believe the guy because he's too nice.
yeah. No, I mean, it's just Chesty and Sorokin do go back. And so, I mean, they were already pretty close friends, obviously, from McKay before they even played in the NHL. So I think with them, it's a little different where they were already really close and respected each other's games before they both came to the NHL. But yeah, I obviously understand like what you're saying.
Now the player comps thing is interesting because it's like I think about this is a conversation I had with a couple of creators in my Twitter GC, and with me primarily bouncing off of my homeboy Derek Dunn as a standard. We were talking about the common thread between like a lot of like the generational profile guys and guys who had that NHL impact is like they've had like a combination of like not just only like the physical tools which help them dominate their younger years, like putting up those absurd like minor hockey, AAA junior stats, etc. But also like kind of just either having or be training themselves into having like the awareness situationally and positionally and like having that form of just absurd IQ. Um, it, it's funny because like that was uh, you know that's something that's helped someone like both Matvei Michkov and Sidney Crosby, and they have that common thread with someone like Wayne Gretzky as well. But he's in a different class from those guys because they had the physical tools, whereas like he obviously had nothing exceptional physically about him whatsoever throughout most of his life. But because like of how much tape he studied, he just was basically prepared for every situation. And even when he was like young, those sort of attributes was why he was like, why he already had this like hundreds and hundreds of minor hockey goals by the time he was 13. And to that point, Derek said that, in his opinion, and I was inclined to agree, that the true successor to Wayne in that respect is probably Nikita Kucherov. What do you guys think on that one?
Well, you left Damien speechless apparently as he chews on his gum thinking about that. Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah. I think
I
that's about, yeah.
was gonna say I'm not familiar with what Kucherov did before the NHL, so I wouldn't really have like.
Well, I'll spell it out for you. Watch his NHL game tape, and then think of him wearing a non-NHL jersey, and it looks really fucking similar. Um,
Yeah, style-wise, but like the results really kind of were not there throughout a lot of his pre-draft seasons because like it wasn't until after he started carving himself out in the QMJHL for in the, like his post-draft phase that he really started to become what he was capable of. So that's why I think Hitchcock's potential, bearing in mind Kucherov's status as one of the best offensive players, one of the best offensive wingers to ever play, is intriguing because uh, like for one thing, like Matvey plays a similar style in terms of like that half wall playmaking and like you know and is also willing to embrace contact more, which is why so many of his goals have come in from in the KHL from in close to the net, which is valuable because that's where most NHL goals are scored. So that shows that like we might have like a guy with that same playing style with better physical gifts that overall produces better results. But I did think about that from like the angle of like, yeah, when you look at Cooch, like I think the distinction is that he does have, although he uses it as like a weapon in the toolkit in a manner akin to Mate, he does have like the capability to show off flashier skills as opposed to Wayne slap shots across the ice surface Gretzky. But he really isn't a physical standout guy. Like he definitely is like his IQ is his best weapon in that Wayne-esque manner. So it did make sense to me personally.
no, for sure. Like looking at the parallels between really all three, like the overall playmaking, the vision, the skill. I mean, hockey IQ being what it is, you know. I don't remember who it was who basically referred to Michkov as the anti-Bergeron of just his overall offensive IQ and ability. Pretty much makes it easier for everybody else in the offensive zone. And really, like Kucherov has kind of ascended to finally having, like, not finally, but like having that skill set. Obviously, you know, Kucherov, much like Gretzky, was blessed most of his career to play with one of the top goal scorers of his era, i.e., the relative output of Jari Kurri and, you know, Steven Stamkos. But, like, yeah, definitely the similar skill set. And then with what I've seen from Mishkov in Russia, like, you know, it's going to probably be a little bit difficult for him. You know, I think Konechny and him could have a really good connectivity and really good teamwork fairly early into his first year.
Well, they play on the same wing, so it would
Yeah.
most likely be primarily in power play situations.
So, like, until he can really get out there, I think with and it's not going to happen overnight, obviously. You know, that's going to, like, Mishkov's skill is going to really come along. And I think he very well could be anywhere in that 60 to 75 point range in his rookie year here.
Yeah, definitely. Because, like, I mean, I think we've seen it time and time again. He's never taken a step back in any season. He, has never like stagnated either. And it seems like every time he's like ascended to a different league, he's showed a different thing in his arsenal, and like he figures out very very fast exactly what he can get away with. Um, so it's like especially the NHL jump will be easy for him because he's been primarily playing on NHL ice surfaces throughout his life in terms of like rink size because of the transition that they've been making. So like it's already an easy jump, and with especially with him having already proven that he was one of the best players in that league to the point of celebrity status. Pretty quickly. The fact the rookie learning curve for him, well, probably a curve, but it's going to be very, very much shorter than it is for most players, even of his caliber. Never mind other ones that have established roles in the league.
I think realistically, like the only barrier that I think he's gonna encounter, and when I say barrier, I'm talking about the 100-point plateau more than anything, is gonna be the players around him and just the finishing ability. Like you look at Kirill Kaprizov, who I don't think is. I'm not gonna call him a good comparable, but I do think that his offensive output in the KHL is, for all intents and purposes, the closest thing to apples in terms of skill set and winger ability. Just in the fact that they both hovered around that point per game play for several years, playing against really good teams, and not all of it being done, on either Army or yeah. So
Yeah,
like, yeah,
of course. Yeah, I mean, Kaprizov was fortunate because he played a lot more games for Scott than
yeah,
fucking like Michkov did, whereas Michkov was playing with freaking like Artur Tyanulan and other
yeah.
individuals who were putting up like 13 points before playing with him. But yeah, generally, I like from an NHL standpoint, it's definitely true. But you had anything more to say on that?
So yeah, I think that until Philadelphia can get him either like consistently with a fringe elite left wing or a fringe elite goal scoring center, like that's gonna keep him in the 60 to 85 point range for the first couple years until like there is a guy like a Stamkos who can rock 60 goals in a campaign with him. Because
Yeah,
you look at that, like that's how Kucherov broke into that 144 point universe,
yeah,
is just having guys.
it's a complicated situation with them too, because like you look at guys like they can shoot, but there hasn't really been guys to like set the cycle up or anything really, which is why it looks so toothless after the time. But like Tyson Forrester, like him having that like goal scoring output was like respectable, but not what it could have been because he wasn't given carte blanche to shoot as much as possible, and you have like to his credit, it was part of why his defensive percentile was fucking absurd, like it was. But like, you have like Torts telling him to be consistently engaged in forechecking and like battles along the boards. It's like, no, get that guy into a fucking high danger spot so he can use his ridiculous shooting capability. It's freaking absurd. But then, of course, and then it's like with the best playmaking center that's consistently healthy because some of his metrics when like he was good like in good shape or like really good talking about Couturier, but in terms of the guy you can lean on the most in that position, it's like it's been Sean, but it's also been Morgan Frost primarily, who doesn't have like anywhere near the ceiling for that to be like leaned on for that role consistently. Like I'm not a hater of his at all. Like he's dealt with a lot of like uh, defamation in addition to being like in towards doghouse. But like I don't want him to be like a 1C playmaker either. To the point, and it's to the point where combined with his defensive responsibility, I think Couturier is the guy that like, especially looking at the area specific areas in which he successfully completes passes, that he's the most sensible guy to put Mitchkov with. And the shooting is also for the group is troublesome because some guys have good mechanics but not the best shot diet. Like Owen Tippett is basically like the epitome of that. Like the guy's physical tools are great, but he's never figured out like the situational aspect of it. And there are times also where his attempts absolutely just go wild too. Like he's just the epitome of a guy whose abilities are not tempered by like the an adequate offensive hockey IQ, despite the ridiculous gifts that he has. And like that sort of thing, it can be an obstacle for that group as well. But hey, with what he did with Sochi, we'll see if he can like elevate that a group ceiling again. It wouldn't be the first time, and it's like for him to even have somewhat competent forward group bodes well for him. Probably better than a lot of other generational talents, as I dedicated that article to.
Forgot to breathe there for a second.
If I believe, my soul will breathe.
My soul might breathe, but my lungs forgot. I don't have any appropriate digs at players or people. I don't wanna make a joke about death. It's too soon.
Damn.
Hey man, there are lines I won't cross, brain damage not being one of them, but
No, I just am pretty like I just like curious as to like how that thought process even landed there. Like I think I kind of know. I can kind of smell some Espen Knutson energy, but then again, that was quite a while ago now.
it went somewhere much, much darker and much, much more inadvertently political. And
the worst is that's literally what I was thinking too, and I'm like, nope, Damien, don't do it.
yeah, I put it in the group chat in text because the viewers at home don't need to know where my brain went.
You know who might be the OG of like the modern movement of sailing it wide in that Owen Tippett-esque manner is probably Josh Anderson. Like that's a conversation I had recently.
I think it's a good comp though.
Yeah,
Like,
you know,
bull.
it's kind of like the Avatar, you know. In every generation, a Scott Norwood is born. Oh wait, that's Buffy. That every generation. The point still stands. Josh Anderson is actually, if we consider Scott Norwood the first high and wide sailor of the seven seas of professional sports. I guess he is, you know, the first Slayer, and then the season 7 bullshit gave birth to guys like Paul Martin in the playoffs for the Penguins, Josh Anderson, Owen Tippett, Eric Croto in every street hockey game we've ever played.
I gotta be real, and this is probably gonna come across to Canadiens fans as like doing like the pick versus pick thing, which has been going on since the Cole Caulfield Cam York dynamic and was continued by the Mitchkov thing, which is hilarious to me because in the second case, it's like, oh, you're ass mad because your team passed on him and now you're going to make shit up about the guy. But really, I think with the addendum that he was recovering from shoulder surgery this year, like Cole Caulfield is kind of in that category as well at the NHL level. Like, he's definitely like, he is like the GOAT in hypothetical situations. Like, he's the best 40 goal scorer who's never even cracked the 30 goal plateau. And part of it is like that sort of like amazing shot mechanics that he can't put on net sort of thing. To the point where it's actually remarkable that he and Suzuki had the capability of raising guys' ceilings, as we've seen with Harvey Pinard and Slavkovsky now.
Yeah.
I think at this point, like health issues aside, even if you just look at the additions in a vacuum, we might be at the point where we can say that Brent Flahr got it right again, and that Cam York was probably the better draft pick. If nothing else, in terms of like team impact, if not individual impact.
You know what's kind of crazy though, looking at that draft class just off the cuff? Caulfield's availability and accuracy being considered in this statement, it is fucking remarkable that the only guy in that class that has more goals than him is Jack Hughes. That really speaks to how bad all the other dudes are at scoring at this point.
I
Capo
mean,
Caco, I'm staring at you.
it doesn't help that it doesn't help Trev that his availability has been crap and that he's was like you know actually like going into this season performing at like a respectable PPG rate in comparison to Hughes. And that, like volume wise, that he was like neck and neck with him. Like he's caught some bad breaks as well, and like the skill is visibly there. Like he may or may not be a game breaker and might need the right line mates to be like who he is, possibly capable of being. But he's still really, really damn good.
Yeah, I mean, hey, at least every single team in this draft, not named the LA Kings, can sit there and say, well, hey, at least we didn't take Alex Turcotte. I'm proud of Turcotte at this point in his career. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? He did get a new contract to play in the AHL some more for the Ontario Reign. Who would have thought? Oh, 6 years apart, like 5 years apart, man. I thought Michael Dal Cole was going to be like a one-of-one guy who just couldn't fucking figure it out. And this is not a slight against Alex Turcotte at all. But man, it's remarkable to me that Alex Turcotte is basically following the Michael Dal Cole like trajectory. And like it's so similar too, because you look like a guy like Capo, like I specifically blame the class of 14 for the reason why Capo Caco still plays for the Rangers, because like Sam Reinhart leaves Buffalo, goes on to be a fucking world beater in Florida, Stanley Cup champion. Sam Bennett leaves Calgary and becomes an incredibly viable role player elsewhere, which is what really where Kirby Dach's career is arcing towards at this point. I don't think he's going to be anything sensational in Montreal, but hey, if he can get healthy, a decent utility role player like a Sam Bennett's not a bad turnout for the Habs. And Bo Byram, if he could stay healthy, could have a similar, and yeah, maybe this is a reach, but could have a similar, team level impact that Draisaitl's had in Edmonton. Again, I think Draisaitl's great. I think he's a little overrated because he gets a lot of favorable matchups being the 2C to McDavid. But hey.
So my question is, like, with regards to Doc specifically, like, that high-end 2C capability, is that something that you could actually envision, like, significantly adding a competitive advantage to a top six on a legitimately competitive cup contender team?
I think Kirby Dach is on a competitive cup team, much like Sam Bennett, where he's a competitive 3C. Like, he doesn't have the high-end 2C on a team that actually has real center depth, which Montreal does not.
Yeah, because that's always how it's been said to me. Like, would it be like if they were to be a 2C, like it would probably be like on a bubble team, posting like respectable stats, but like not exactly helping them get that over the hump.
Yeah, I genuinely at this point think that his ceiling is that he is basically Sam Bennett in terms of overall game score impact. Like, much like Leon Draisaitl, like, if Kirby Dach's ever going to be, like, Kirby Dach, sure. Kirby Dach could be, a legit... Oh, God, this is going to be awful.
Not for nothing, but Bennett was primarily the 2C above Lundell on this latest run.
Yeah. Objectively, I know. But at the same time, you look at the center group in Florida and how they're able to pivot guys off the wing. Like, with Barkov taking basically 4C matchups and deployments at times for his defensive ability, like, Bennett saw some pretty historically viable, like, deployments against, 2Cs and 3Cs, where, Barkov was really laid into a lot of those higher... Yeah.
Which makes them kind of, like, difficult to sort of, like, evaluate in that respect because of, like, because Barkov being like the unicorn that he is, where like him as like a Selkie winner would actually like it's just something like that you wouldn't bat an eye at because from like any perspective because of the results that he produces there are not just like really impressive defensive results for a guy who can score. It's like legitimately ridiculous what he can do in that respect. To where like that sort of like evaluation for like basically of like what the rest of that forward group looks like down the middle is like not something you can hold to a traditional standard because of like the way of how their deployments look that are just so atypical contrasted with the rest of the league because of that specifically effectively.
I think
Which is
yeah.
why I say firmly that Barkov is a much, much more important part of their success than Matthew Tkachuk is. Like, to take nothing away from the guy, he's fucking phenomenal himself. But like, Barkov has a gigantic workload with like, ridiculous assignments in all zones of the ice that he excels at tremendously to the point where like the debate about who their best forward is shouldn't even exist.
Oh yeah, I mean, like realistically, the reason they become a cup contender with Kachuk, it's not that Kachuk is substantially better than anybody on the current roster. Is he great? Sure, but like really the difference is Kachuk's ability to do the things that Jonathan Huberdeau couldn't do is really just the difference. Like Huberdeau was a great playmaker, good vision, had one god tier season and otherwise was just a legitimately good top six winger where like Kachuk's goal scoring and like physical applications in the corners, his work as an F1, his work on the back check, like he just he's not even in the same conversation as Barkov, but just the fucking upgrade he ended up being over Huberdeau in terms of how complete his game was what because really all Kachuk did to make the Panthers better is Barkov can only play 23 minutes a night most nights in the playoffs. Kachuk getting out there at 18 minutes when Barkov's not on the ice makes them a really fucking hard team to play against for 42 minutes out of 60.
Oh, hell yeah. And it's kind of like a reminder that like it's funny how it works sometimes because like you could act it's like a manner akin to like the right piece that has high end but like just sort of fits into the roster role and adds like a specific dimension. Like it's almost akin to like Drew Holiday being like the right perfect upgrade from Marcus Smart effectively. Like, obviously I guess you could treat Jason Tatum as like the Alexander Barkov equivalent to almost like a 1-for-1 sort of thing. But like Kachuk is effectively like, a Drew Holiday-esque piece. And of course, go figure, Matthew Kachuk and Jason Tatum were at Chaminade at the same time to add another layer to this. But Kachuk is just like the right upgrade to like a guy who was beloved and talented, but just didn't have enough dimensions and, added another thing that just made that matchup so much more difficult to where it pushed them over the edge to a chip and you could actually basically see that it was coming. Of course, difference being only that the Celtics, it was such a foregone conclusion given that they lost freaking 18 games all year long.
And on that note, I think it's time to roll our tires into the end of this week's episode.
But it be like that sometimes. Let's see. Jeez. I feel like I gave a lot away some of my prospect perspectives somewhat, which is where I kind of was going to take this. But there's just that Hlinka Gretzky Cup coverage ended up being very comprehensive. So inevitably that was going to put a slight wrench in things. But I will say it. kind of framing it in another way. Like, I'm gonna double down on my Adam Bannock perspective here. Like, I think that we're at a point where it's just like his capabilities should transcend that conversation about him being like a mid to late first because of his stature. Like, sometimes you're just at such a tremendous skill level where he should go inside the top 10 unless he, like, be passed on and make teams regret it for, like, due to that height obsession. It's just like, I really strongly feel that this kid has just got such a tremendous talent level, such like ability to play under the bright lights and with so many dimensions to his game that you should just be able to ignore it. Like, when you're producing the sort of results he does in multiple ways and putting up like that sort of point productivity, it's just like, does his size really even matter at that point? No. It's like, you have a kid who's legitimately more talented than these generational North American guys. It's just like so visceral, just like, and so effective, and his capabilities, like, to the point where like that was like just such a big conversation piece. And I'm gonna also say this, with his only thing preventing him from being an ideal player in the eyes of scouts being the fact that he's a lefty rather than a righty, because we know how coveted the big RHD with mobility is, especially like Matthew Schaefer should be going right behind him at number 2. Like, I really think that we've got enough of a glimpse at this point of his capabilities. Like, he had a really, really strong season in the OHL as like its youngest player at such a difficult and demanding position, and on a team that is not exactly exploding with talent. Like, the Erie Otters are, they've always had trouble with their management off the ice, and they're definitely not in the Connor McDavid and era immediately after it phase anymore of their on ice quality. Like, they're right there neck and neck with the Guelph Storm in terms of like incompetence of these like one and done, like swept out of the first round type playoff teams. So like, with all the results and with his leadership qualities and the fact that his maturation is going to make him more complete, more cerebral, like to the point where like in terms of like impact, Matthew Schaefer, like, you could make an argument for him as like impactful in a way like that is just so valuable to a team that you can't ignore it, that he should be a top 2. And does that shake things up moving like James Haggins, the guy who basically took the torch from, or really just like seized it, especially with that outplaying in international tournaments from Michael Misa, who does still have a lot of capabilities. He just really needs to realize to where he's been. But there's no doubt that the conversation has shifted to where like he's in like, he might even get picked like 15th or 17th. But like, to shift James Higgins out of the top 2, yeah, does it like add a degree of chaos? It might even seem absurd. And maybe even like a bit reactive, just based off of a specific tournament at which he himself didn't even play. It seems brash on the surface, but I think it actually makes like sense to where I can see it, happening. Like, I can absolutely like see a scenario where the conversation around 2025. A very, very deep and strong class has shifted just based off of where the wind seems to be blowing.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm just gonna, again, kind of reference, the point you guys were talking about earlier with all these horrible sports journalists with the horrible clickbait headlines that just lead these idiots to uneducated casual hockey fans, leading to just a bunch of insanity. Um, as a Pens fan, it's been an interesting week as far as the Malkin saying that he wants to finish his playing career in Russia, where I'm sure you guys can imagine the headlines. I'm sure you guys have seen them. Where now it's like everybody's like, oh, he doesn't want to retire a Penguin. It's like, guys, you're an idiot. Read the article. And even with the Sid, I mean, yeah, patiently waiting for the contract, but like all these banana headlines that have no substance to any of the articles, like, guys, just stop. Just educate people. You have the platform. You have the reach. Stop posting bullshit.
Sources, trust me, bro. On a lighter note, but also a heavier note, gotta congratulate Taylor Wenskowski on a great career in the PWHL. Officially called it a career this afternoon, well, this evening, effective about 2 hours ago, going on 3. Rochester, New Hampshire native, one of the homegrown Boston players. I love to see the career she had. So proud of her, so proud of what she's accomplished, and it's going to be a really long time. She may have the most iconic goal in PWHL Boston franchise history for a lot of fucking years to come, because triple overtime series eliminators against Montreal sports teams in this city kind of live forever. The 2011 Boston Bruins. There's a lot of Michael Ryder, Nate Horton, Mark Recchi fans for their actions in that series. So congrats to number 12 on a great career, and just real glad we got to see her really record such a fucking iconic moment in Boston women's sports history.
I will go full incendiary and say that I have only increased in envy as the years have gone by that Andrew Ference got to flip off Canadiens fans in a celebratory fashion with regards to that series. But yeah, no, you're right. Like, just like the monumental aspect of that, a moment like that, just make sure that it has an enduring legacy. So happy trails, as they would say, in a phase immediately before the OG big finish on PTI. With regards to the Sid thing, it's funny how like it's gotten to the point where people can just like do it on like gut instinct. Even like people who are accredited reporters, like, oh, he didn't do it by his birthday, which has become like the standard like deadline. It's like, what? Look, you are effectively like an insider at this point who could get in touch with an actual team source and at least feel things out. Why don't you do that instead of doing this dumbass speculation bullshit? Like, I follow enough of those writers to see stuff like that periodically, and I'm just like, you could easily find out some answer as to what's going on by now. Use your fucking platform and power to actually do something useful here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the pretty solid episode this time around. Of course, like, definitely like another one where we're reaching, but I think we're doing all right under the circumstances of these dead months. We'll keep writing. There's still plenty of off-season review stuff to come out. Probably more prospect profiles. I have ideas circulating in my head because of some of the guys that made an impression on me. Let's see what comes out. Sure to be high quality. Expect that Carolina piece soon. New era for them, new GM, with a very interesting background. We look forward to bringing that all to you, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening on Spotify. In the future, have a good night. Take care.